Hello and welcome back to the channel. As always, I'm your host, Morgan. Now, this past month, some exciting research about shark and ray mating has been published, and I want to talk about it because our shark and ray friends down in the ocean are super cool and I find them interesting. Before we jump into the bulk of this study and why it's so cool to me, I would like to mention that I have both the actual study that was published in the Journal of Molecular Ecology, which is open source, so you can take a look at that, and the article published by the Scripps UC San Diego publication that is just a little bit more clear and a little bit more easy to understand for anyone who's not accustomed to reading these scientific publications. So let's get into this. The study itself was a joint effort from shark scientists from the Georgia Aquarium, the Scripps Institution of Oceanography at UC San Diego, and Dalhousie University. And one of the things that they're looking at is this whole phenomena of multiple paternity in elasmobranchs, so sharks and rays. And what multiple paternity is it's this thing where the female will give birth to a litter of pups, but the pups may or may not have the same father. So pup A and pup B might be from different paternal sources, so they're really half siblings. However, they were born in the same litter. Now, this phenomena has been largely attributed in the past in the literature to male aggression, in that the females, it's more advantageous for them to just submit to advances from the males during these mating seasons than it is to try to get away, because the males are aggressive and she's very likely to lose her life if she were to fight back. So just submit, and then it results in these multiple paternity litters and essentially the convenience polyandry theory, which again, the assumption of this theory is that there's a greater cost for the females to refuse the males than to just submit to the males in this case. However, there's something that hasn't really been looked into, and so the lead author of the study from Georgia Aquarium, Katie Lyons, pointed out and mentioned that this kind of takes the agency away from the females of the species and doesn't ask the question, if she's going to be investing all the energy into making these big babies, why doesn't she have some sort of choice in the sire of those offsprings? So the other question here is this advantageous to the female? And if so, what would the advantage be to having offspring with multiple fathers? And what would be the advantage to having offspring in this multiple paternity situation where the litter is not fathered by one male of the species? So that's kind of what this study first aimed to do, was look at it from that female perspective. What are the advantages and disadvantages to the female? Because in the shark and ray world, mating is kind of violent anyway, and females are still going to suffer injuries whether or not they decide to reject the advances from the male or just submit to the advances from the male. What did they do? The researchers began developing models based on both biology and physiology to test whether the multiple paternity phenomena was in the best interest of females, in the best interest of males, or a combination of both. Because while it is intuitive to say, oh, well, it happens because males are aggressive and it's better for the female to just submit than risk losing her life rejecting the advances of a big male, it kind of ignores the fact that in a lot of shark and ray species, females tend to be larger anyway, and females do tend to have adaptations that do help them during the mating. I believe it's in rays. There's some thicker skin areas where the male will bite, and that just kind of helps the female protect herself in the long run. So what is going on? Is multiple paternity advantageous to both genders, one gender? Because also, it doesn't necessarily seem to be in the best interest of the male, because more males are passing on their genetics. So in mating events, the big alpha male wants to be the only one passing on his genetic material, only his bloodline going on. That's a massive oversimplification of it, but that's the general gist of what we usually understand as what's going on during different mating displays, why it's advantageous for males to engage in either these violent displays to attract a mate, or even engage in these very ostentatious displays that can actually put their own life at risk and make them more visible to predators. Think peacocks when you're looking for an example of that one. The beautiful tail and the beautiful plumage is lovely, but it does put them at risk. The tail can weigh them down, and it does make them much easier to spot by the predators, but it attracts more of the peahens. So that is the example of that case. And then everyone should be able to think of an example of males fighting for a mate. A good mammal example would be bighorn sheep that are very violent in their displays, because they have to be to maintain that alpha status. So even though it can be detrimental, they can get seriously injured, possibly lose their life, it's worth it to pass on those genetics. So in the shark world, very similar. Big males are going to fight each other to get the attention of the female. So why would it be advantageous to at least the alpha males for this multiple paternity to have popped up? I can see how the smaller males it would be advantageous for. But again, that ignores the fact that it does take energy for the females to recover from the wounds from mating, since in the shark and ray world, mating is violent. And it ignores the fact that the females have this massive energy input to produce the offspring in the end. And honestly, that's whether they're laying an egg or they're going to give live birth. It's a lot more energy intensive for the female in that way. So what exactly is the advantage here to this multiple paternity now that we've kind of been hemming and hawing around this whole subject? Well, based on this study, the advantage could be that the female in this case has passed on her genetic material with the genetic material of other males, giving her offspring the best possible chance of survival. Let's break that down a little bit though, because it seems a little So if for some reason offspring that was sired by male A ends up not being fit enough to survive in the environment, she still has offspring out there from the same litter with males B and C that may have an advantage. While she'll lose any pups that were sired by male A, she still has her genetic legacy out there in pups from males B and C. So it's not a loss for her, where in this case, it was a loss for male A. But that's really oversimplifying, but that is the general gist of why this can be advantage for females, because it gives in one kind of mating cycle her energy investment into the rearing of the offspring or the laying of the eggs. And it's not really rearing of the offspring, because once they're born, they're on their own. I'm more meaning in the cases that give live birth, carrying them to that period of live birth. It means that her investment is kind of protected because she didn't put all of her eggs in one basket, so to speak. She has kind of a backup because there are multiple fathers to the offspring. And one of the big points of this study is that it does kind of not entirely discredit the theory that has been kind of explaining this whole phenomena that, well, males are aggressive and the females don't have a choice, so yeah, their litters are going to have multiple fathers. But it says that that's not the only reason, because yeah, they are entirely saying that that is likely part of the reason, but until more work is done, and since shark and ray mating is rarely documented to begin with, and studying critters in the ocean is kind of a hard thing. They are elusive, and we just know that this thing happens. We may or may not have a full understanding of why this happens, either in the near future or at all. So, how are some of the ways that the females even manage to have litters with multiple paternity? Do we know? Does the study talk about it? Well, it does talk about it, and we have some ideas, but not all of them are going to be applicable to all species. So, how does this multiple paternity thing happen? Are there any controls for it? Do we have an idea of how it happens? Especially since these females are giving birth to litters with multiple fathers. Like, how is that possible? Well, there are a few ideas floating around. There is some documentation for sure of how this happens at times, but not everything is going to be applicable to all species, and some of the hypotheses may just be straight up wrong. But sharks and rays are very elusive, they're very hard to study, and mating is rarely actually documented. So we can really only go on the data that we have when the litters are either just about to be born or just born. So one thing that has been found about stingrays native to the California coast that do have this kind of different paternity pattern thing is that they have 2 uteri, and it can be seen that some females will have one uterus full of offspring sired by one father, and then the other will have offspring sired by a different father. Other females will have a mixed paternity in both uteri, so it's not as black and white as, well, they got 2 places, so each male's offspring will be in a discrete location. So even in species with that kind of cool 2 uteri thing, it's not as simple to answer the question of how does the multiple paternity happen. And there's also hypotheses going around that, well, females might ovulate in different patterns. So they ovulate, mate with one male, ovulate again, mate with another male, and that results in a litter with this multiple paternity. But the big thing is here, we still don't know. However, there are ideas of how it happens. And there's also the question of, are these females able to even hold on to the sperm for a while until eggs are fertilized and ovulation happens? And something similar to that is actually seen in mammal species. So we know that the females likely have some sort of anatomical tool that will allow them to control the sperm that fertilizes their eggs and the paternity of their litters. We just don't know exactly what tools are used at all times. And it's likely to vary from species to species. So because sharks are elusive, they are hard to study, there's not a whole lot of instances where mating has been witnessed in many species. A lot of this is going to be left up to hypotheses that may or may never have any real answer to them. And it's just going to be a lot of guesswork. But it is this really cool thing that they have pretty much figured out is not only advantageous to the male, but there are distinct advantages to the females having their litters sired by multiple males. So, I mean, that's all I'm really going to go into right now. It's just, it's an interesting thing. And the bottom line here is that the main takeaway from their study is multiple paternity is not controlled by only the male or only the female. It is a combination of both. And there's a lot more questions than answers at this point, and there may always be a lot more questions than answers just because of the nature of studying sharks and rays. But it is fascinating, and I wanted to share that with you all. So I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, afternoon, evening, what have you. Please consider subscribing and giving me a like, or even leaving a lovely little comment down below so that I can hear about your thoughts, especially about sharks and rays and their mating habits. So I will see you all next time. Thank you again for watching this video. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and ring that bell if you would like to see more. And if you'd like to follow me on any of my other social medias, the links are down in the description below. Don't forget to check out thereptilegoth.com for all of my articles and blog posts. If you found any value in this video and you would like to help support the channel, please check out my Patreon page. That link is also in the description down below. And a special thanks goes out to my Diamond Dragon patron, Diane B. What you're doing is really helping me fund a dream here. I will see you guys all in the next one.